What, in your experience, do you feel are some of the most unexpected benefits for people in moving into this kind of village?
Well, my current affiliation at Stanford University is in the School of Medicine as part of a group called Stanford Flourishing. And the key driver for me, for ReGen Villages, is and has always been and will continue to be about happy, healthy longevity, that people can live very calm, peaceful, healthy, happy lives, and that the communities are visceral in that way, from babies being born in the community to life celebrations happening, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, whatever it may be, to people, finding new economic models and inspirations of self-worth as opposed to work or their title, but real self-worth. And then as people mature and get older, that wisdom is something that should really be respected and understood, to impart back to the children. Most importantly, that as a child growing up in a village like a ReGen village, you see where you belong in that story arc of life. That as you get older, your knowledge and your wisdom is revered and is interesting and important. And that's where we've really lost our way, I think, as a species, to imagine that if you have a baby, you're a pariah, and if you get to a certain age, you're garbage. And that's essentially what we've been telling people, that there's this sort of sweet spot of, between 20-something and 40-something, and everything else is really peripheral. And that's a big mistake. So this ecosystem, sociologically, anthropologically, psychologically, these are not communities that have social engineering. They're mainly intended for multi-generational, multicultural, and most importantly, socioeconomic level difference communities that can come together in these locations, where it doesn't matter if you're in a social affordable apartment or you are in a villa, or if you are from another country or another part of the world, or that you're young or that you're old. Food is the great disarming for that. Recipes or stories. And that's my background, is when you're eating healthy, delicious things and you're laughing and you're telling stories, it just removes all these barriers between people that have been created, as illusions, that somehow we have all these differences with each other, and we really don't. At the end of the day, people want their kids to grow up healthy and strong and have meaningful lives and have hope for their children and children after that. And people want to grow older with dignity. I think that's pretty much the human experience, if I could say. What ambitions, at least. So that's the new wealth, put it that way.
What do you see are some of the barriers to making this vision a reality?
Well, you can see the brick marks on my forehead, probably, because of the fact that, being an entrepreneur, Elon Musk, he says it really well, it's like eating glass every day. I add to that, it's like being on this roller coaster where, the teenage kid who was running the roller coaster didn't really strap me in very well. So with every turn and every curve, I'm just literally like flying out of this roller coaster, and for some reason I keep getting back on, and I keep riding it. So the barriers are many, because of the fact that there's greed, and I think that's the kind of the heart of the issue, is that there's a current kind of concept around needing to maximize profits always over the benefit of public goodwill. And I'm not talking about communism, and I'm not talking about socialism. I sort of extol the virtues of something called compassionism, where you can have profit, and it can be an impact kind of profit, but it's shaving some number of percentage points off of that, and also extending the number of years that you get that profit kind of back out. Sufficient for enough, hopefully, to reinvest in other kinds of impact investments. So that's really the mechanism. It's this new kind of philanthropy, which is not just giving and walking away and expecting some glossy, kind of report at the end of the year with metrics and graphs, but actually that there's an impact return to that philanthropy, which then is, again, reseeds that aquifer, and then that liquidity can go back out to other impact groups. So in terms of barriers, I mean, I like to say that it's not a matter of technology. It's a matter of money and political will. And when you look at the political will, it a lot of times operates around money and those industrial forces. For instance, the rules on the books to build a neighborhood, to build a subdivision, those rules were put on the books 100, 150 years ago. I like to say mostly by old white guys in top hats with these long white beards.
The monopoly guys.
Well, yeah, because they owned district scale water and power and sewage and of course big ag and all these different things. They have this need to create and perpetuate dependency on their systems, and that is baked into the laws and the rules of zoning and permitting. There's no good reason. It's not a matter of physics. There's no good reason that you can't get a piece of land, do all the right permaculture planning, do all the right kinds of thought process for the right balance of people living in those communities in relationship with that nature, and be able to go from master plan to move in 6 to 8 months using prefab, manufactured components, wall units, modules, etc. All the technology is there to live in these very beautiful self-sustaining communities, but the rules have to change. So that's a huge barrier where we hope our software, actually, the Village Operating System software, as a tool for modeling these new regenerative resilient neighborhoods, can come to play as kind of a golden key to unlock a new rule book, basically. But also that the software, once it's done modeling and creating the blueprints for that community, that software also is what is used to actually run the regenerative infrastructure for that neighborhood. So there's a tremendous value for developers and constructors and municipalities to create these kinds of communities. Another big barrier, and I believe this to be true, and I also believe the software will solve, is that governments are afraid, for some reason, of decentralized communities, because they fear that people will maybe rise up and say, I don't want to pay taxes. Why should I if I'm not connected to district scale managed services? Why should we have to pay into a system in that way? Well, that's the reason also when the municipality and the regional and the national governments and the funds and others are using our software to help create this new rule book. That's the basis then of establishing this long-term positive relationship. So they don't lose tax base, in other words. But also that we can look at creating these communities with new opportunity zone tax structures. So if you move to a community like this, you get a benefit. If you start a business in a community like this, wow, you get another big benefit. If you hire and employ people as part of that new business in that regenerative resilient community, then you even get more benefits. So And that's really where we have to think these days in terms of breaking down, those barriers. So there's no shortage of them. We just have to be creative in making a new model, as Buckminster Fuller used to say, make a new model that makes the older models obsolete, where those players then want to join and be part of that because that's where they see their future profits coming from.
As an entrepreneur, I've found that the philosophy seek forgiveness, not permission, has worked out quite well for me. Is there a place for that here?
Yes and no. Because you traditional rules and regulations are, considered like handed down from the Almighty. It's himself. Like here's this zoning book, and the bureaucrats aren't bad people. They're good people, and they want to see ReGen Villages get built. But when they open the rule book, and it says, we can't change that rule because that rule is on the books. Well, that's the thing is you can't just build something and then ask for for permission or apologize later. You need to kind of front load and start to change those rules earlier on, and that's what we're doing now. And I think we've made a lot of progress with that. It's also the floodgate. They can't control it anymore. You've got this exodus of people coming from cities, and they desperately need new build subdivisions where they're not going to put their money in to traditional build. Yeah. They're not going to put their money and buy or rent in traditional car culture subdivision developments. They're demanding for the ability to have access and agency to food and water and clean energy and waste to resource management. They're demanding these things. So we're ReGen Villages is really perfectly positioned to answer the pain points of those landowners and those local governments and also industry to be geared up to deliver these kinds of communities rapidly. And then I really get excited about what's possible for the global South, that in rural India, sub-Saharan Africa, across ASEAN, even here rural America and Canada, places that are really hurting, that people on a social or barely affordable kind of budget can have access to housing, not as a privilege, but as a right, and have agency with natural resources, not as a luxury, but as a right. So yeah, I mean, I really feel like we can make that business model happen for the bottom of the pyramid, but then you really need the systemic funding from governments to support that. And with social housing especially, there has to be some kind of path to ownership, that as people work and live and do things in the community, they're essentially paying down a mortgage. So 20 years in, they can actually give this property, to their kids, etc. So I'm excited about these ideas, and now looking at what's happening with what's called the green transition coming out of Europe and the EU, Canada. Trudeau has made announcements. You've got South Korea, New Zealand, and what does that mean? It's a green transition for a post-COVID optimistic future, investing trillions, really, in new green infrastructure. And what that is inclusive of is especially housing and localized resiliency. So, I mean, again, we're kind of perfectly situated with our software and our vision and our plans to help inoculate these kinds of self-reliant neighborhoods at scale around the world.
The brand new Future Thinkers members portal is now live. Develop your sovereignty and self-knowledge with our in-depth courses, get access to our weekly sense-making calls, join the Q&As with past podcast guests, and much more. Become a Future Thinkers member today at futurethinkers.org/members. Enter the Future Thinkers giveaway and win our brand new community membership, including in-depth courses, private calls, and more, as well as a supply of Qualia, a complete cognitive upgrade for your brain. To enter the contest, simply go to futurethinkers.org/giveaway and sign up for our mailing list to instantly get our 50-page guide on how to adapt to the future. There are many ways to increase your chances of winning. Enter the competition today.